I've moved into a luxury property in a prime location downtown. Jealous, aren't you? You can live here too, if you become our slave and swear absolute obedience. Unbeknownst to my stepmother and sister, who left me alone in the old house and moved out, I was supporting the family with my work from home. My father, who should be aware of our family's situation, left me behind. How could my unreliable father afford a house? There's no way he could buy a house. What's going on? Stop joking. A new place downtown for Dad? What? You know how much he brings home, right? $1,300, that's it. How's he gonna pay a mortgage? My stepmother flipped out, accusing me of lying, but a few hours later, she seemed to have uncovered an unbelievable truth. The truth, which was new to me as well, left me speechless. And as a result, even my sister got involved, leading to a tragic end. I'm in my mid-20s and still living at my parents' house. I have a dream that I just can't give up on. To make this dream a reality, I've been living at home and working from home. My work from home involves clerical work, which can be monotonous and frankly, sometimes painful. I guess it's not enjoyable because I feel like I have to work to live and survive. To escape this painful job as soon as possible, I have to make my dream come true. My dream is to become an illustrator. I'm well aware that it's not an easy world to break into, just being able to draw a bit doesn't cut it. But I believe I'll regret it if I don't challenge myself now. So, I'm prepared to hang in there until I can truly say I've done my best. In the past, the traditional path was to enter illustration or design contests, and getting an award was a way to break into the field. But now, it's an era where anyone can easily publish their work online. Uploading your work online can get it seen by many, and some people have turned it into their profession. It's said to have a higher chance of success than winning contests, so the online world is flooded with works by self-proclaimed illustrators. I, too, am of course posting my works on social media and free posting websites. Free posting websites sometimes host contests in partnership with the industry, and I've heard that industry people often check these websites. However, my father seems to think that all my efforts are just chasing a pipe dream. He could support me if I was still a student, but as an adult without any signs of success, he believes I lack talent. He tells me to give up on illustration as a hobby and get a job at a reputable company. That would be the real way to show filial piety. My mother passed away when I was young. My father was often away for work, and my younger sister, who is a few years younger, often cried for our mother. Seeing my sister like that, I thought as a child that I had to become a mother figure for her. My academic performance was below average. I preferred drawing over opening textbooks. Moreover, I was below average in looks, bad at sports, and always the last in any competition. My sister grew up seeing me and decided she didn't want to end up like me, so she dedicated herself to studying. I hardly ever saw her study at home, so it seems she was the type to learn efficiently just from classes. My father doted on her. I wanted to achieve my dream as soon as possible rather than go to college, so I didn't pursue further education. My sister, using her natural intelligence, got into a prestigious university. Straight into a high-demand program, which only increased my father's spoiling. After starting university, my sister acted as if her future success was guaranteed and looked down on me even more. I don't want to become an adult who has nothing to be proud of like you. I feel like I'll catch whatever you have if we breathe the same air, so keep your distance. After a while, a publishing company noticed my illustrations. It wasn't a posting website, but an illustration I posted on social media with a casual comment that caught their eye. An editor who contacted me invited me to participate in a contest they were holding, saying it was a chance to test my skills. Regardless of the outcome, I would get an editor, and even people who hadn't made their commercial debut but had an editor were participating. Skeptical but thinking I might not get another chance like this, I accepted the invitation. Later, when I visited the publishing company, I was introduced to the editor who would be handling my work. There, I was taught about the difference between hobbies and professional work, and that simply drawing illustrations isn't enough. Taking guidance from professionals seriously and pouring my all into my work, I entered the contest and, to my amazement, won the newcomer's prize. Having that title allowed me to gradually receive more work. Since I hadn't signed an exclusive contract with the publishing company that approached me, I began receiving requests from various directions. Because I had to handle both administrative tasks and drawing on my own, juggling my work from home became increasingly difficult. However, being a newcomer, my work was cheap and it was uncertain when I might run out of work, so I thought it was too early to quit my day job without causing inconvenience to anyone. Just when I started to think about how to proceed, my father suddenly announced he was getting remarried. I was at a loss on how to react when he brought home his new fiancée all of a sudden. On one hand, I thought, a new mother at this point, but on the other hand, I wondered if I should be happy that my father found someone he wanted to remarry. It turns out the woman who would become my stepmother was a classmate from a reunion. She had harbored a secret crush on my father during their school days, so she was over the moon about reuniting and marrying him. My father, too, seemed completely smitten, to the point where it felt like he didn't need to listen to my opinion anymore. Though their dating period was short, they decided they could make it work since they had a long history as classmates. As an adult, I had no reason to oppose my father's remarriage, but seeing the two of them so lovey-dovey in a romance mode, to the point of being cringeworthy, did indeed make me feel quite alienated. However, my sister was blessing their union, so it wasn't like I could just oppose them childishly. I adopted a stance of neither supporting or opposing. After that, my stepmother started showing up at our house more frequently. Then, all of a sudden, she began to demean me under the guise of motherliness, mocking me. Despite your sister attending a prestigious university and having a secure future, you, after graduating from a high school with low academic records, didn't go on to college or university and are working from home? She began to say I should take after my father, who works at a major company, or my sister, who's attending a prestigious university. Moreover, she unilaterally decided, without looking into the details of my job, that my work-from-home job was nothing more than meager earnings, essentially equating it to piecework. My stepmother always exuded a sharp perfume scent, bragging about how her belongings were coordinated from specific brands, or how her past boyfriends worked at well-known companies. She was all about status. Indeed, the high school I attended may not be as famous compared to my sister's. However, it was an arts-focused school. I thought it unfair to be compared to my sister's school. I disliked my stepmother for discriminating against me based on her own baseless comparisons. From our first meeting, there were signs that my stepmother looked down on me. Since I was always at home, the frequency of her visits gradually decreased. However, when my father was off work, she would make it a point to be around, flaunting their relationship in front of me. I found my father's love-struck behavior repulsive and wished they would just move out to a new place. Months after my father introduced his new wife and announced their marriage, there had been no discussion about our future living arrangements, which frustrated me enough to confront my father. I went to his room, but we must have just missed each other as he wasn't there. Thinking we couldn't have missed the opportunity to talk, I decided to wait in his room for him to return. My father had always been busy, so his room was often cluttered since he sometimes brought work home. Since it was always messy, I never directly tidied up for him. As I was looking for a place to sit, I accidentally brushed off some stacked documents. Realizing my mistake, I began to gather them up to return them to their original place. That's when I noticed the words "termination notice." Curious about the ominous words, I read the content of the notice. According to the document, it seemed my dad had caused significant losses to his company through some misconduct and had been fired as a result. I was shocked by this unexpected revelation. Just then, my dad came back, and although I had planned to discuss what would happen with my stepmom moving forward, I ended up confronting him about why he had kept his termination a secret. Dad looked guilty but mostly admitted it was true. He even tried to maintain his dignity by saying the termination had happened just this month, only a few days ago. Whether it was this month or last, the fact that he kept his termination a secret didn't change. And this was right after taking a new wife. I wanted to say, "What were you thinking about keeping this a secret?" But I knew getting emotional would only escalate the situation, and now was not the time for family discord. So, I tried to keep my emotions in check and asked him what his plan was moving forward. "Don't worry about living expenses. I've secured a job at a factory. The salary will be $1,300 a month, but we have savings, and I have connections, so I'll be able to rejoin a major company soon." Internally, I thought, if you have such connections, why not get hired by a major company right away? $1,300 for how long? Savings won't last forever, you know? I knew my dad, who dotes on my sister, had been lavishing her with quite luxurious gifts. From brands well known even to me, who have no interest in such things. I recalled the uproar online over some limited edition bag costing thousands. I argued that my stepmom and sister should be informed about his job change, but my dad insisted, absolutely do not tell them. Even if he kept silent, a decrease in our standard of living would surely raise suspicions. Dad didn't seem to understand anything about our household. He desperately claimed it would just be a matter of enduring for a while and that he would quickly make a comeback, seemingly wanting to recruit me as an ally in this situation. He even lowered his head, asking for my cooperation, saying he would talk to my stepmom when the time was right. Honestly, I didn't like my dad. Not as much as my stepmom, but he was somewhat status conscious too. Even so, it's a fact that I've been able to live off my dad's earnings, and being allowed to stay at home while aspiring to be an illustrator is thanks to him. If my dad really wanted me, he would have said, "If you're not going to find a stable job, then leave." I reluctantly agreed to my dad's request, believing his words that it would just be a matter of enduring for a while. If our standard of living dropped, my sister would soon realize something was up. She seems to think there's nothing she can't have. My dad has always given her everything she wanted, but if he stops doing that, it will become obvious. I decided there was no choice but to step in for my dad and maintain our standard of living, to try my best. I put the idea of focusing solely on illustrator work on hold and continued juggling my work-from-home job and illustration work. But that alone was far from reaching my dad's previous salary, and I ended up cutting back on sleep to increase the number of illustration commissions. Some clients expressed concern, asking, "We appreciate it, but are you sure you're not overdoing it?" I made sure to work quickly and accurately, paying attention not to compromise on quality and to avoid as many revisions as possible. Overworking myself, I aged significantly beyond my mid-20s, with both my hair and skin becoming terribly worn. The dark circles under my eyes wouldn't go away, and my long-term boyfriend and I started drifting apart, leading to him unilaterally breaking up with me. We had been dating since high school, supporting each other's aspirations in the arts. He too was working part-time while seeking people willing to pay for his artwork. In fact, he had secured a contract with a company before me, but had been struggling since then. As his luck seemed to wane, mine began to improve. The contest came around that time. He congratulated me on my luck, but it seemed his heart wasn't in it. Eventually, he said, "Art won't fill your living," and after much deliberation, gave up on the arts and quit. He then used a relative's connection to land a job at a decent company. He gave up on his dream halfway through, but he always supported me, saying he wanted me to achieve it. However, it turns out that was just lip service. When he broke up with me, he told me to get my feet on the ground and work a stable job. Comparing me to my accomplished sister, he said there was a world of difference between us, which hurt me deeply. Even though I felt looked down upon by my father and sister, I believed I could share an understanding of art with him. Despite our different fields, I thought we could look towards the same future without giving up on what we had now. But he coldly told me that the admiration I was receiving was only temporary and that I would be discarded like a worn-out rag eventually. I genuinely rejoiced in his success, even when he surpassed me. That day, I cried where no one in my family could see me. My work as an illustrator continued to go well. While I was out of the house for about half a day for a meeting about the next project with my editor, my dad and sister took drastic action. In my absence, they had moved out without me. Moving isn't something that happens spontaneously. This means they had been preparing secretly behind my back. And now, I couldn't even contact my dad or sister. The house was still standing, and only their belongings had been moved out, but I hurried to check on the ownership of the house. I had never worried about the deed of the house before, but logically, it should be in my dad's name, and there was a possibility he had sold it without telling me. Not knowing how to confirm this, I reached out to my aunt, my mom's sister, whom I trusted more than anyone. Then, I was told the truth for the first time. Though I had thought the house was owned by my dad, it turned out to be in my aunt's name. Apparently, the house originally belonged to my mom. It was built by my grandparents for my mom, and just before she passed away, my dad wanted to take over, but my still living grandfather strongly objected, and somehow, it ended up in my aunt's name. My aunt said she had everything ready to change it to my name if I wished, so I asked her to proceed with that. Around the time we started the process, my stepmom contacted me. She said my dad had bought a new house in a prime downtown area. For a moment, I wondered what she was talking about because there was absolutely no way my dad could afford a new house in a prime location now. "You must be lonely in that old house by yourself? You can live with us if you want, as long as you become our slave and swear absolute obedience." The condition continued, stating I would also have to do all the housework while continuing my work from home. My stepmom, who had thought of my work from home as mere piecework, seemed to have done some research since. Finding out that some people make a lot with work from home, she started demanding that I work hard enough to be in that well-earning group. My dad hadn't told my stepmom about his monthly salary yet, and boasting about buying a new house just didn't add up. There had to be a catch. And now, their mess had even started to affect me, which was no joke. I didn't care about my dad's pride anymore. I told my stepmom the truth as my dad had explained it. "That new house, is it on mortgage, or did you pay in full?" Either way, my dad couldn't afford such an expensive purchase right now. Didn't you know? His current salary is $1,300 a month. That's less than what you look down upon me for earning. A house paid in full? Impossible with his earnings, right? He's still working at a major company and has a substantial retirement fund, so even taking out a 35-year mortgage now, we won't have to worry about our old age. A 35-year mortgage for my dad in his 50s? My stepmom laughed at my nonsense, but realistically, it was she who was being absurd for believing my dad's talk of taking on a mortgage now. I stood my ground against her mockery, saying I wasn't lying, and if she really believed in my dad, she should have checked with him directly. She scoffed and hung up, but a few hours later, she called back. I ignored her calls for a while, but eventually picked up. And from her tone, it seemed she had learned the truth. However, my stepmom isn't the type to meekly give in and accept things as they are. My stepmom's initial shock gradually turned into anger. My dad couldn't possibly take out a loan, nor could he have the savings to make a full purchase. So, what exactly was the new place where my dad and stepmom were staying? Here's the real deal. My stepmom was under the impression, or rather had been led to believe, that my dad had purchased a new home in a prime downtown location, but in reality, he hadn't bought anything at all. The reason they were in what she believed to be their new home was because my dad had managed to borrow a high-end property owned by a friend at a significantly reduced rate for a short period. Why would you lie about something that's bound to come out? I was flabbergasted. My dad apparently wanted to impress his newlywed stepmom. Impressed with what? Huh? Such vanity is unnecessary. The world revolves around money. I got close to you, putting on an act I didn't want, just to secure a place as the new wife because of money. My stepmom had believed my dad's boastful tales at their class reunion and used all her feminine wiles to secure the position of wife, thinking he was wealthy. But in reality, my dad had become nothing but a low earner. The fact that his monthly income was only $1,300 and his plans to switch jobs at the right moment didn't matter to my stepmom, who was beyond furious. My dad hadn't expected her to be so outraged and angered, thinking he could fix everything by fully utilizing his connections. So, I thought bitterly, why didn't you use those so-called connections from the start? A monthly income of $1,300, is that some student's part-time job? Huh? Are you mocking me? What's going on with your father? It's your responsibility as his daughter to deal with this mess of a dad. I had no obligation to continue dealing with my ranting stepmom. After all, my dad hadn't even officially completed the marriage process with her. To me, she was just a stranger ranting nonsense, which I could easily ignore. So, I quietly hung up the phone and blocked her number. The fallout from my dad's lie about his pride wasn't limited to me. My sister was also affected. Ever since we were kids, my sister had a habit of taking my dad's words at face value. That hasn't changed, and she had completely believed his lie about the new house in a prime downtown location. She had bragged about it to everyone around her and even made plans to invite them over. Relying on my dad's connections, my sister hadn't been job hunting at all. Naturally, if things continued this way, she would end up unemployed, which she had always said she didn't want to become. It looked like she was going to end up on a path similar to mine, which made her quite anxious. To keep up appearances in front of my stepmom, my dad had taken out loans from various places. Thankfully not from dangerous sources, since the debts were incurred before he was fired. However, due to the large amount of debt, my dad had to give up many of the luxury items he had spent so much money on. This also affected my sister's belongings. Despite her protests, my dad, claiming everything he bought with his money was his, had resale dealers take away anything that could be converted into cash. Even then, the amount wasn't enough to cover the repayments, so my dad decided to sell the house. However, the deed had been transferred to me, thanks to my aunt, so he couldn't proceed as he wished. After my dad and sister moved out on their own, I changed all the locks, so they couldn't enter the house anymore. My dad and sister later approached me, wanting to start over as a family, but at this point, I refused to listen, adamant in my decision. Subsequently, my dad and sister apparently lived together in a modest place. My dad, despite being in his 50s, had to do physically demanding work from dawn till dusk to pay off the remaining debt. Around the time the commotion settled, my ex-boyfriend reached out. He confessed that he had been swayed by my sister's advances, admitting he had made a mistake. My sister had convinced him that switching to her, a promising stock with a future after graduating from a prestigious university and landing a job at a famous corporation, would be a much better deal than being with me, who was destined for a modest and poor future. You're doing amazing, aren't you? I've seen the rave reviews for your illustrations on social media, and you've got a digital serial coming up, right? You're such a rising star. I could become a homemaker and support you," he added. Moreover, he had the audacity to ask if, by any chance, I could pitch him to some clients I knew. Despite having landed a corporate job, he started rambling about how he believed his only path to success was through art. I made it clear to him that I was perfectly fine without him and firmly rejected any notion of getting back together, even if hell froze over. Half a year later, I was able to make a living solely as an illustrator and quit my work-from-home job completely. The digital series was well received, and a deal for publishing in print was finalized. Additionally, I was chosen to work on the illustrations for a new book by a popular author. Finally, I felt like my dream of becoming an illustrator had come true. Sometimes I would get so absorbed in my work that I'd lose track of time, which worried my aunt. To help out, she started visiting once a week to take care of various things. A year later, I ended up getting married to someone I met through my work. He was supportive of my career as an illustrator and believed firmly in a woman's right to work. He mainly takes care of the household chores, always laughing and telling me not to worry about it because he enjoys doing them. His smile always encourages me, and I feel incredibly happy. As for my sister, she failed every job interview and graduated without a job lined up. Despite looking down on me, she's been picky about jobs and remains unemployed, living in a modest place with my dad. Recently, my stepmom moved in with them. After vowing never to go back to a pretentious man like my dad, she couldn't find anyone else and ended up returning to him. Now, the three of them live in a cramped room, constantly fighting. Watching my dad, I've come to realize that living a life full of pretense gets you nowhere. I've sworn to live humbly.